The Golden Grimm by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 10, Countdown. Silly little man, by all means, persecute that poor boy, but put pressure on him, make him feel the monster that you believe him to be, drive him from your homes, your cities, hound him, harry him, give him not a moment's peace. In the end, he will come to me of his own free will. I am inevitable. I have already won. You just don't see it yet. Salem. Countdown. Mount Glen lay empty. Osmond took one look at the dead city and knew he would fail to find his quarry here in the moonlight. The scorched street and dissolving Grimm told him all he needed to know. There had been a battle here, a recent one at that. Dead streets and dead buildings scorched by battle, fresh craters still smoldering with meager flames. Yes, one look was all it took. When he waded in, he didn't expect to find much. Imagine his surprise then when he stumbled upon something. No, someone. It began with a flash of color among the ruins, bright white and blue, atlas colors. Here, curious, he spied it in the distance and crept closer, cane at the ready. Mount Glen might well be dead, but Grimm still prowled the street. He would not be taken unaware. In the end, his caution would prove unwarranted. They did not rise, didn't move, didn't respond in the least. Even when he stopped a stone's throw away, he had but to look at the ruins to understand why. What must have transpired here? The specialist had died, and died hard, taken a great many Grimm with him. Still, it seemed strange to find his body positioned in such a way. The body badly mangled, so much so as to be nearly unrecognizable. The tales suggested it was a faunus, but that was all he was able to discern. A specialist, one of James then, left behind as a warning perhaps? No, that wasn't like him. Moreover, why would an Atlas elite even be out here in the first place? Why leave their body here? It didn't serve any purpose beyond. Hello, Ozma. Wait. Osmond's shoulders tensed as a name carried to him on the wind. His blood ran cold in his veins. No, it froze solid. Only 3 beings in existence would call him such. 2 had forsaken remnant, and the third. Long had it been since he'd least heard her voice, but he still remembered it with bittersweet fondness, which was precisely why he felt the way he did now. Salem. The knight turned, headmaster pivoted in place, fingers white knuckles around his cane, gripping until his hand went numb. The shadows seemed to stretch around him, counting red eyes peering out of the dark. It wasn't the Grimm he feared. Even in his weakened state, he could still cut swathes through any army she dared throw at him. To say nothing of her so-called followers. But if she had come here in person, then he would die. Rather, this body would. All the progress he'd made in this life, ruined, undone in an instant. A fresh shiver shot down his spine. No, he reassured himself, she couldn't be here, not yet. Surely she wouldn't be so bold as to come in person. She'd always been so cautious in the past. She wouldn't feel the need to be here. She would have sent an envoy, some Grimm perhaps, maybe even one of her lieutenants, but to leave the safety of her tower and risk exposure? Never. Even she wouldn't be so foolish, unless... What's wrong, dear friend? There it was again, those dulcet tones he knew so well, though he still couldn't see her. Nothing to say. It's been... How long since we last met like this? What is there to say? He willed himself to stand strong, to straighten shoulders that even now bowed with the weight of defeat. You haven't changed. Come now, she groaned. Don't be so cold. We have much to discuss, you and I. A shadow detached itself from the darkness of a dilapidated building, and he whirled to meet it. Surely she spoke through a seer, hidden somewhere in the ruins. Please be a seer. Brother gods, if you're out there, if you're listening, please let it be a seer. After all, chalk-white flesh gleamed in the starlight as she stepped forth, full lips quirked in a faint smile. I've missed you so. Not a seer, definitely not a seer. Eyes of shadow and flame met his, rimmed by a veined face, beautiful even now in death. She tilted her head just so, a strand of ashy hair obscuring one eye. Questions buzzed through his mind as his gaze met hers. Why was she here? Why was her hair down? What devilry was she up to this time? I thought I might linger and see if anyone came for this. She nudged the rotting corpse at her feet. A pity, he begged before the end, but your suffering will make this look like a mercy. Osmond hardened his heart. He'd been foolish, but if she thought he would go quietly, she was sorely mistaken. I thought you might come here, but alone? She touched the hand to her cheek and tucked it once in that way she did, poisoning one's fond memory with scorn. Look how you've diminished yourself. Those blood red eyes flicked over him, keen assessing, cold as ice. And for what? Still no victory, even after all these years. Realization dawned, and with it, dread. You have him, don't you? No. Her smile thinned out into a frown. Your little bird made certain of that. Osmond paused, just short of a biting retort. Crow, he was with Summer. He'd spoken to him not an hour before. I should have known you would keep raving close. Selim hummed on, headless of his confusion. Was her betrayal a ruse too? How very clever of you. I'll admit you surprised me, but it was foolish of you to reveal her so late in the game. Did you not think I would hunt your maiden? She will suffer for this. Maiden? Some of his confusion must have shone through, because her eyes lit up. Oh, you didn't know? How delicious! That smile became a sneer. Seems your inner circle isn't so secure after all. The revelation shocked him. How would Raven even know of the boy, let alone act in such a short time? Crow, he must have told his sister, which meant, betrayal. He'd suffered such before, but it still stung. Treachery after treachery, first James and Tai Yang, now another old friend. Was everyone turning against him? Would Leonardo be next? His shoulders sagged, and he forced himself to shoulder such thoughts aside. No matter, he must carry on as he always had. Steeling himself, he looked upon the one he'd once loved above all else. What do you want from me? The boy, for starters. A faint note of amusement touched her lips. Give him to me, and I will grant you a century of peace, generations to build your defenses. On a whim, she waved a hand, and the teeming eyes glaring at the dark began to retreat. I'll even allow you to colonize beyond the 4 cities for a time. It's a fair bargain, no? One life for millions, it was, which would make her impending victory all the more painful. Naruto, that boy could not be allowed to live. His very presence upset the status quo. But what could he do with Grimm? It would shatter. But what he could do with Grimm, it would shatter the world. Grimm were not people. They could never be people. The very notion that such might be possible threatened to unbalance everything he had worked for. And if Salem got her hands on him, if she gained an army of hybrids, or whatever the devil that blonde braggart could create, it would doom them all. I won't let you harness such power. Planting both hands upon his cane, he braced himself for the killing blow. I'd sooner kill him first. It never came. Are you certain, old friend? Salem reached out, cupping his cheek. I will not make such an offer again. Think what we could achieve together, what we could accomplish. Oh, he knew full well that road. What he knew full well where that road led. The ruin of the human race. Fondness too. He had been tempted once. Never again. He twisted his head, tearing free from her grasp. I will not. He expected anger from his ex-wife, dismissal at the very least, certainly not a smile. Her lips quirked in a smile he knew all too well. It was a look of pure poison. The last time she'd worn such, Mount Glen had been set ablaze. That she wore such a smile now boded poorly for him. Even now you refuse to change? For a moment she sounded almost sad. You don't see his potential as I do. No matter. Her hand fell, and the darkness swarmed with red eyes anew. If I cannot achieve my aims by diplomacy, then I shall take what I want by force. You taught me such, after all. At some unseen command, Beowulfs crept from the shadows, and others, Ursai, the stalkers, Beringles, all. Aspen gave them all the attention they deserved. None. You cannot kill me. I know. Selim hummed, but I can certainly inconvenience you. Thus speaking, she snapped her fingers. The horde descended. Everything ached. His head, his arms, his legs, everything. It felt like his very soul had been diced into bits, pushed through a cheese grater, which was then shoved through a blender. In short, pain. Bloodshot eyes creaked open, half expecting to find himself in a cell. He couldn't even be certain of that. Everything was too dark to see, and his eyes wouldn't adjust no matter how hard he squinted. The walls looked like fabric, which implied a tent, but the ground was hard, also cold, kind of sticky too. Though that might have been his dried blood. Best not think about that overmuch. His mind fixed on a singular thought, to the exclusion of all else. The others. He had to find the others. Lisa, Alpha, Rim. Were they safe? Were they all right? With a supreme effort of will, he planted one hand beneath him, or rather, he tried. The harsh clink of metal reached his ears, and much to his chagrin, he found he was scarcely able to move them. Someone had shackled his limbs to the floor, leaving him laying in a horrible, awkward position. So much for thinking he wasn't a prisoner. You've got to be kidding me! Someone tore the flap aside before he could contemplate that thought, sending shards of sunlight spilling into the room. His eyes snapped shut. Mistakes were made. Blind as he was, he never saw the kick coming. It certainly felt like someone had kicked him. He felt the telltale impression of a boot against his face. Another cracked him upside the head, sending his world spinning. Rise and shine, Cupcake! The woman's voice brayed. There's work to be done. Naruto blew out an angry breath. Don't do that again. You mean this? Another kick blooded his nose. Anger sparked. He surged upright. The chains snapped. End of chapter 10. The Golden Grimm by Neon Zangetsu, chapter 11, Cutthroat. Come now, don't act surprised. 'Tis a tale older than time, older than myself, really. Treat someone like a monster long enough, and eventually they become one. Salem, Cutthroat. Raven woke to screaming at dawn, not just any screaming, mind you, the high, reedy cry of someone about to die. For a wild, fretful instant, she thought it was herself, but no, the voice didn't belong to her. Tried telling that to her body. Panic bleated in her brain and had her thrashing out of bed like a madwoman, only for her body to fail her spectacularly. Her shoulders sang with pain, white-hot agony spearing down her spine with such intensity that she actually blacked out for a moment. She came to and found her face in the floor of her tent. Memories came rushing back soon thereafter. They served as a grilling reminder all the same. Right, her shoulder was screwed. One did not face Salem without risk, and her injuries were not minor. She'd all but fell out her portal and into her bed the moment she got out of Mount Glen. Another scream pierced the morning, this one sharper, shriller than the last. She'd probably get on that. I'm sorry, someone wailed outside her tent. Oh please, oh God, I didn't... Splat! Something spattered the floor just outside. Her hackles rose. Monster! Another cry went up. Stay back! Stay! Words died in a bloody gurgle. Ah, hell! She spat and forced herself upright, swearing like a sailor as her armor screamed all the while. She'd taken a well-deserved rest, trusted in her tribe to follow her orders, treat her guests right. Her own damn fault. Bandits wouldn't know hospitality if it slapped them upside the head. She heard another scream, a wail of fear. Then she was out the tent and into the fray. In truth, she had expected to find Grimm running hither and yon through the camp, devouring her men. What Raven found was so much worse. While she did hear howls in the distance and glimpse a few red eyes lurking in the shadows, it was a far cry from the dread swarm she'd both feared and expected. But the bodies... Oh, the bodies. Hey, boss. By chance or luck, Raven Bronwyn believed in neither. She found one of her men sprawled nearby just shy of her tent. The poor fool was gripping a tattered hole in his stomach. Anyone could see he wasn't long for this world. Glazy eyes looked her way, already misted over. Her anger sparked, and she seized the fool by the throat. I told you to keep him here. We did. For now. Chained him up real good. A wet cough followed. But he got loose. Loose! Horror dawned in her heart. When I said keep him here, I didn't mean with chains, booze, women, Leon, anything but chains. Where the hell is Vernal? Where her man blinked up at her, not quite comprehending. The silence was telling. She was holding a fading fool, which meant her second was probably just that, dead or dying. The stupid girl. She'd always been eager to prove herself, too eager. Leave it to her to piss off the one man she shouldn't have. It wasn't fair. How had everything gone so spectacularly wrong? Her temper slipped its leash. Omen reared free from its sheath and lopped the dying man's head clean off his shoulder. It wasn't enough. You absolute idiots! She swung down into the corpse again and again, screaming in her fury. How could you screw the pooch this badly? The corpse had no answer for her. She stomped down one last time, blood spattering her face, and forced herself to move on. She found the kid's human companion's cage nearby. The huntress was still as the grave, and the reporter didn't look much better. There was a nasty welt on her head. Hopefully they'd been knocked out. Please, gods, let them be knocked out. If they were dead, she'd have no way of calming that living hurricane down. Damn it, damn it, damn it. In the end, she couldn't find the keys and gave up. Omen flicked out and shattered the lock. She stalked in and made for the huntress. What was her name again? Elm? Right, that was it. Hopefully she'd forgive her for what she was about to do. Her heel cracked out in her chest. Wake the hell up! The burly woman groaned. Was not good enough. Raven reached down and, ignoring the agony in her shoulder, grabbed a handful of the larger woman's hair, slapped her shoulder once, twice, thrice. On the third strike, the huntress finally caught her wrist. Good. Anger. They could use that. She didn't have time to explain. Call your boss. Now. She tore her wrist free, dropped the woman, and wadded back into the fray, which begged the question, where was the... Her sixth sense screamed a warning, and she twisted to the side. A body, what was left of one, hurtled out the haze and spattered itself on the wooden palisade behind her. She pivoted, seeking the source, and found a shadow swinging in the smoke. A man roared in the smoke, and bandits flew through the air by the dozens. Once there, they were snatched out of the sky by a bloody Grimm dragon of all things. The lucky ones were crushed in her claws. Then that lot died quickly. The unlucky found themselves bathing in tainted black fire spewed from her jaws. Their deaths were long, lingering, full of misery as the flesh sloughed from their bodies. Nope, not messing with that. Though she tried to flee the blaze, and there were many, were set upon by the blonde, one-eyed woman. She swiped a sword from someone, somewhere, and the bloody hell she knew how to use it. Vicious swings made short work of any who lacked aura. Those who died were left begging for death. She didn't deliver it. The dragon did. It was too much. If this continued, they'd be wiped out, and all because of a spectacular miscommunication. Grimacing at the pain in her shoulder, she stormed into the fray. She could see the kid, Naruto, ripping through her men just ahead. He still wasn't losing steam. Crow was right. You couldn't fight something like this. Your best hope was to calm it, placate it, give it what it wanted, and get the hell out of its path. Her tribe had learned that lesson too late. She stormed her way now. She stormed his way now, careful to keep her hand well away from Omen's hilt. Stop! She hollered. Stop fighting, you louts! All of you! Weapons clattered to the floor. Too little, too late. The wyvern saw her and swept down. Her heart skipped a beat as she beheld the sheer bulk of the beast up close. Fly, flee, escape. In that moment, she wanted nothing more than to turn tail, cut a portal, and flee. She knew what would happen if she did. She'd never make it in time. A single bite would take her head. She stood her ground, unflinching as that unholy Grimm landed before her. Massive slavering jaws parted not an inch from her face. She willed herself to stand fast in the face of them, and the baleful roar that followed. A filtered air blasted her face. Her hair flew back, but she kept her eyes opened, squinting only a little in spite of it. You done? Naruto turned to face her at last, fire flickering over his face, and her heart skipped a beat. Is this what you call hospitality? Raven froze at the gleam in his eyes. They were red now, like a Grimm, dangerous and wild, strong too. No, now was not the time for such thoughts. There was something on his left arm. Dark Tar twisted the limb into a monstrous black claw she hadn't seen before. She'd seen him fuse himself with that dying Grimm back in the glen. It had made him stronger, give him abilities he'd lacked before, until Salem put him down. No such luck here. She had no desire to pick a fight with something like that. The power of the Spring Maiden afforded her much, but she was far from her peak now, and with only one arm to defend herself. Well, best not to take chances. This is all a misunderstanding. She raised her good hand and took a tentative step towards him. You have every right to be angry, but the fault is with these idiots. A thumb flicked over her shoulder. Not me. Yes, thanks ever so much for that, but I don't care. I don't care this. He made a pinching motion with his human maid. What you think? Alpha? A sword tickled the Raven's throat. Sneaky bitch. She hadn't even heard her coming. Those eerie black-red eyes glared her way. If she lies, kill her. Happily, Raven swallowed her anger and her fear, fighting against every instinct she had. Talk, his eyes seemed to say. And so she did. I told the men to look after you. She chose her words carefully, unwilling to move her head so much as an inch for fear of opening her own throat. Apparently they thought that meant chaining you down. Stupid shits. I would have killed them for it if you hadn't beat them to it. If you hadn't beat me to it. And where were you all this time? Asleep. she growled. "I passed out as soon as I gave the order. In case you've forgotten, I pulled your ass out of the fire back there." His eyes traveled to her shoulder, bleeding red through the crude bandages she'd applied. "Not a lie. Where's Vernal?" Her guest scowled at her. "You mean the bitch that booted me in the face? Where do you think she is?" Riven bit down a inane whine. It died an ugly death behind her teeth. "Damn it! If that close call in Mount Glen hadn't hardened him, this certainly had. If that girl was alive somewhere, she'd killed her, personally." With a wretched sigh, she threw down Omen at his feet. "Come to my tent. We can talk there." "Mistral?" Ironwood's jaw clicked open. "Say again, Elm. Where were you? With who?" He hadn't expected to receive the call at all. He feared them dead. "Well done, soldier. So long as you're all right, stay there. Keep your score on. I'll dispatch the fleet." Naruto watched Raven like a hawk. What else could he do? Any trust he might have felt towards her had all but evaporated in the wake of her tribe's mistake. That she'd brought him into her tent did little to assuage his worries. If anything, it only made them worse. Exasperated his darker emotions, or maybe that was the Grimm he'd taken into himself. He hadn't had a chance. He hadn't a choice at the time. He didn't even know he could do it, but the deed was done. Casper had been strangely silent since. Riven plunked down on the either side of the table, eyes dark. "You know who I am?" It wasn't a question. He granted her a rueful grin. "Pretty hard to forget after the entrance you made." "Mm-hmm. I'll be frank, I want to use you, but you're a magnet for trouble." "That and Grimm." "Figured," she huffed. They're part and parcel with you in any case." She hoisted herself to her feet. "We've captured a Grimm. Well, more like it followed you through the portal. I had intended to give it to you when I woke up, give you a chance to show your power before the tribe. But," he scoffed, "already did that." "Fair. If I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't believe it. You're not human." "What do you mean?" The insinuation stung more than he cared to admit. "Of course I'm human." "No," she shook her head, tossing her dark mane to and fro, uncaring for his ire. "You're not. Face it, a human can't do half the things you do. If you didn't bleed red, I think you were Grimm." A growl rumbled through the air. It took him a moment to realize it came from him. "But you're not one of those either, are you?" Raven thumbed her chin, considering him as one might a juicy steak. "You aren't drawn to negative emotions the way they are, and you need both food as well as water to keep going. Not things Grimm would need, which begs the question, what are you?" She crossed one leg over the other, drawing attention to the slender expanse of her thighs. "What you want? What are your goals? Would you believe me if I said world peace?" She barked a laugh. "Bull and shit. I'm not joking. Neither am I, boy." Her eyes were daggers on his, cutting into his hopes. "You can't have peace between humans and Grimm, not while Salem exists. Can you fight her? Resist her?" An unpleasant feeling bubbled up in his gut. "You want a weapon?" Well. Full lips quirked in a smirk. "Aren't you a quick study? You're correct. I do want a weapon, something to throw at Salem, knock her off balance, keep her distracted. Whether or not you can become that weapon remains to be seen." "And I refuse?" "And if I refuse?" Her shoulders rolled in a shrug. "I can hardly force you to comply now, can I? If someone pisses you off, the Grimm will come tearing down on us." His lips thinned. "You're a bunch of bandits. Best in Mistral." She puffed out her chest as if it were something to be proud of. "I make no excuses. The strong rule here. If you have a problem with it, then change it. I can't force you to stay, and I'm not foolish enough to manipulate you. If nothing else, I can promise you this. I will never lie to you. You will only ever hear the truth from me. And here's another. If you try to face Salem as you are now, you will die." And on the other side of the coin, keen eyes flicked up and down the length of him, assessing whatever threat he might present. "Osmond wants you out of the picture, and he'll get his way if you don't push back. As to what that means is up to you. You really are the opposite of Summer." Her eyes flashed. "At least I'm not part Grimm. I know who I am." "Do you?" Naruto knew he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. She knew it, he knew it, but he wouldn't give in. He raised his gaze. "I do." Previews. "But my queen, they're right there. We must strike." Patience, Tyrion. Judging by his expression, she doubted he would listen. Pity. It would be a shame to lose such a useful minion. But perhaps he might bloody the boy, harden him, push him that much closer to her cause. He was close now, ready to be what she needed him to be. He just needed a little push. Summer gripped her arm and doubled over. "No, I won't. You can't make me." The airship descended. A man stood on the ramp and held out his hand. "Come with me if you want to live. You ready to blow this story wide open?" He clasped Lisa's hand. "Wouldn't have it any other way." End of chapter 11.